Hey guys, tonight we set out under a bruised orange sky, the sun slipping down behind dunes that look almost too perfect to be real, as if some child with an oversized bucket has been sculpting them for hours. You stand at the edge of the caravan, sandals filled with sand you'll never quite shake out, while the air cools just enough to trick you into thinking the desert is forgiving. Spoiler, it's not. In fact, you probably won't survive this if you were really here, but luckily, you're just tucked up safe at home listening. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your location and what time it is right now. It's always fun to see who else is awake with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug the strap of your bag higher on your shoulder, the leather stiff from yesterday's dust storm. Around you, traders check ropes, tighten knots, and give those long-suffering sighs that only camel drivers have perfected. The animals grunt and huff like they've already carried enough civilization's worth of silk and spice, and honestly, they're not wrong. You fall into step beside a man whose beard is braided into two neat ropes. He smells faintly of cardamom, as though even his sweat has decided to be exotic. He tells you he's been running this route for 20 years, and judging by the leathery folds of his face, the desert has signed every page of his biography. You trudge forward, dunes rising and falling like an endless sea. Your feet sink into the soft sand, and every step reminds you that water is more valuable than gold here. In fact, historically, merchants sometimes carried more water than goods, rationing it like liquid treasure. Historians still argue whether some early caravans actually mapped their routes by wells alone, or whether they simply gambled on luck and stubborn camels. Either way, your tongue already feels dry just imagining the next few days. As night deepens, stars spill across the sky like careless beads. You remember that navigation wasn't about fancy maps yet. It was about knowing which cluster of stars would guide you east or west. One trader points to the North Star with a gnarled finger, and you think, how odd that people from Rome, Persia, India, and China all trusted the same cold pinprick of light to get them across a desert they had no business crossing. A drumbeat sounds not music, but the thudding hooves of camels shifting into rhythm. There's something hypnotic about it, like the earth itself is setting your pace. You realize this is how thousands of people before you fell into the same sleepy march, moving goods that would change entire empires. Without these footsteps, no cinnamon in Europe, no silk gowns in Persia, no glassware in China. The world shrinks beneath your sandals, one blister at a time. You pause to drink from a goatskin flask. The water is warm, slightly bitter, but it feels like mercy sliding down your throat. A boy no older than 14 offers you dried apricots from his pouch. His family, he says, trades fruit for wool, and you imagine how fragile the math of survival must be here. If one caravan falls to bandits, some distant city might not taste apricots this year. That's the quiet fragility behind the grand tales of the Silk Road. Every market, every emperor's banquet, depended on a teenager in the desert sharing his snacks with strangers. A quirky tidbit passes through your mind. Did you know some traders used crocodile dung as sunscreen? Not here, maybe, but in Egypt around the same era. The desert teaches creativity, or maybe desperation, and you can't help but be grateful for the wide-brimmed hat shading your face tonight. The air cools fast. You pull your cloak tighter, and notice how silence creeps in after sunset. No birds, no crickets, just wind brushing across sand like a hand smoothing sheets. In this hush, you hear your own heartbeat louder than usual, and it feels oddly comforting, like the desert is leaning in to listen. Ahead, a lantern sways, tied to the lead camel's harness. Its glow is faint, fragile against the darkness, but it's enough to give direction. You realize that's what this entire journey is about. Tiny lights carrying you through overwhelming dark. Every merchant here, whether grumpy, cheerful, greedy, or generous, trusts that faint glimmer, because without it, they'd vanish into endless dunes. As you settle into the march, you can't shake the thought, you're not really walking through sand, you're walking through history. The grains beneath your feet have swallowed empires, lost coins, forgotten bones, and yet here they are, supporting you too. The desert doesn't care, but it remembers in its own way. You glance at the horizon one last time before sleep claims the caravan. The dunes ripple in silver moonlight, and the camels groan, folding their legs beneath them like collapsing tents. You curl up in your blanket, sand sneaking into every crease of fabric, and close your eyes. Somewhere far off, a jackal cries, reminding you that even in this stillness, life doesn't pause. You wake to a soft stirring of voices, the kind that weave into dreams before you realize they're real. The night has passed quietly, no raiders, no sudden storms, and the first blush of dawn has painted the sky in pale lavender streaks. You stretch, sand crusted in your hair and clothes, and join the others as the caravan stirs back to life. Someone whistles to coax a reluctant camel upright, and the beast responds with a groan so theatrical it could earn applause. You trudge forward, and by mid-morning the horizon begins to change. At first it looks like a mirage, a blur of green that shimmers, as if the desert itself is teasing you. But slowly, shapes sharpen into reality. Date palms, their fronds trembling in the breeze, clustered around the promise of water. You've reached an oasis, one of the lifelines that dot this otherwise merciless expanse. The relief is instant. Traders quicken their pace, shoulders straightening, eyes brightening, as though the sight alone quenches their thirst. At the water's edge, men kneel to scoop handfuls into their mouths, some splashing it onto their faces in clumsy, joyous abandon. The camels barge past, dunking their snouts, grumbling at each other like cranky old men arguing over soup. You crouch down, cup your hands, and drink. The water is cool, faintly sweet with minerals, and for a moment you think, yes, this is the closest thing to bliss you've felt in days. But an oasis isn't just about survival. It's also about stories. You notice how quickly the place becomes a crossroads of gossip. Two men argue over the price of saffron, one insisting the Persians are cornering the market, the other swearing it's the Indians. A woman sells bread sprinkled with sesame seeds, and you overhear her bragging that the recipe came from her grandmother, who once fed soldiers marching with Alexander the Great. Historians still argue whether Alexander's armies really left such culinary fingerprints across Central Asia, but listening here, you almost believe it. As you sit under the shade of a date palm, someone offers you figs in exchange for a scrap of cloth you don't really need. That's how it works here. Trade is constant, barter is casual, and no one leaves an oasis without a little less of one thing and a little more of another. You realize that money is flexible in a way you'd never considered. You don't always need coins to survive. You just need something someone else wants. You overhear a merchant share a strange tidbit. Apparently, in some corners of the world, People have used blocks of compressed tea as currency. The group laughs, but you wonder how many laughs in history have turned into quiet nods of agreement once desperation sets in. Maybe someday, even your dried apricot could buy you a night's safety. You look around and see that the oasis is also a stage. Storytellers perform tales of ancient kings, embellishing with wild gestures that send children into fits of giggles. A man with a battered lute plucks a sleepy tune, his audience drifting in and out of slumber beneath the shade. For a moment, you could almost forget this is the desert. The air smells of damp soil and date syrup, and you think, if paradise exists, maybe it's just a place with enough water, fruit, and shade. The peace, however, carries its own unease. Oases are magnets not just for weary travelers, but for opportunists. You notice two men with sharper eyes than the rest, their hands lingering near curved daggers as they size up the caravan. The guards keep them in check, but you realize these resting places are always balancing between haven and trap. It's the cost of gathering strangers in one fragile patch of green. By afternoon, the oasis hums with activity. Carpets are unfurled, spices set in bowls, fabrics hung in the branches like makeshift stalls. It's a miniature market, improvised in the time it takes the camels to drink their fill. You wander among the colors, indigo-dyed cloth shimmering, brass trinkets glinting, salt blocks stacked like pale bricks. A boy tries to sell you a pouch of ground cinnamon, insisting it will make you irresistible. You laugh, but he insists with such sincerity that you almost believe him. As evening creeps closer, the caravan prepares to move on. You fill your flask, tuck a few dried figs into your bag, and glance back at the oasis. The palms sway gently, already reclaiming their solitude as travelers trickle away. It feels almost like a dream, a green pause button in the endless brown. Walking out, you realize how much these oases shape the rhythm of the Silk Road. Without them, the journey would be impossible. With them, it becomes a chain of breaths, inhale, exhale, between deathly deserts. Historians still debate whether the earliest Silk Road routes were mapped deliberately to link these life-giving pools, or whether the pools themselves became famous only after traders stumbled on them. Either way, you know one truth. Every step you take away from the oasis feels heavier, like leaving behind a piece of hope. The stars begin to prick through the twilight again as sand crunches underfoot. The caravan stretches long and thin in the fading light, shadows swaying like tired giants. You think back to the woman who sold you bread, to the boy with the cinnamon, and realize you've carried more than water away from that patch of green. You've carried stories, bargains, and perhaps a little superstition too. The desert welcomes you back with its dry, endless silence. Somewhere behind you, the oasis shrinks into memory. Ahead, the dunes roll forward, indifferent as ever. You pull your cloak tighter and press on, knowing that the next breath of relief is many days away. You shuffle along in the sand, the caravan stretching out like a slow-moving serpent, its humps and shadows bobbing with each step. The stars have wheeled across the sky all night, and now the horizon is softening into a muted dawn. The desert feels gentler in these first few hours, as if it hasn't quite remembered how cruel it's supposed to be. Your feet ache, but you're not alone. All around, you hear the quiet grumbles of fellow travelers, some muttering prayers, others telling jokes that barely land because everyone's too tired to laugh. This is caravan camaraderie, the glue that holds you together when the sand threatens to scatter everything. Someone hands you a small, hard loaf of bread, baked days ago but still edible if you chew long enough. You share your figs in return. No one really eats well out here, but the act of sharing makes the food taste like a feast. One man produces a skin of fermented mare's milk, kumis he calls it, and insists you take a sip. It's sour, fizzy, and tastes like regret, but you swallow politely as everyone chuckles at your expression. These little moments stitch the caravan together. Later, when the sun has climbed higher, the stories begin. A young trader with eager eyes recounts a tale about a caravan swallowed whole by a sandstorm, their bones supposedly still rattling under dunes that shift like restless ghosts. Historians still argue whether these buried caravans are more myth than fact, but in the quiet of the desert, the line between history and rumor blurs easily. You catch yourself glancing at the dunes, wondering if they really are holding secrets just beneath the surface. Another merchant brags about his trip to Rome, claiming he once sold silk to a senator's wife who mistook it for woven moonlight. Someone scoffs, pointing out that Romans were so obsessed with silk they actually debated in their Senate whether wearing it was morally corrupt. That's true, by the way. At one point, Roman officials worried silk would make their men too soft, too decadent. Yet here you are, trudging with bales of the stuff while the Senate's warnings blow away like dust. As the day drags on, voices rise and fall like waves. One old man hums a tune from Persia, its notes curling into the dry air like incense. A boy drums lightly on an empty water gourd, keeping time. Someone else launches into a long story about a fox spirit that follows caravans at night, luring travelers away with the sound of a crying child. A shiver crawls down your spine even though the sun is hot, because the desert seems exactly the kind of place that would hide such tricks. In the evening, after the caravan halts, the camaraderie deepens. Fires are lit in small hollows dug into the sand, their flames shielded from the wind. The smell of lentils and flatbread drifts through the camp. You sit with a circle of strangers who already feel like family, trading bites of food and trading bits of yourself too. A man shows you a scar across his arm and tells of bandits in the mountains. A woman pulls out a piece of glass from Rome, holding it to the fire so it glows like trapped starlight. One quirky detail surfaces in conversation. Apparently, some travelers swear by stuffing garlic into their sandals to ward off foot rot. The group laughs, though a few wiggle their toes uneasily as if reconsidering their footwear choices. You tuck the advice away, just in case. As the night wears on, the circle loosens and stories turn softer. People murmur about the families waiting for them at home, about the hopes tied to the goods strapped to camelbacks. You realize the Silk Road isn't just about spices and silk. It's about the invisible cargo of longing, fear, and love carried along with the trade. Before sleep, you gaze across the caravan. Camels groan as they fold into their awkward kneeling positions. Travelers curl into cloaks, and the desert swallows the chatter bit by bit. For a moment, you feel suspended between worlds. Alone, yet bound tightly to every stranger here. The desert is vast, but camaraderie makes it just a little smaller. Your last thought before drifting off. Maybe this is the real treasure of the Silk Road. Not the silk, not the spices, but the laughter, the stories, the shared bread under an indifferent sky. Morning breaks with a brittle chill, the kind that nips at your fingers before the sun decides to show mercy. You rise stiffly, brushing sand from your clothes, and join the slow reassembling of the caravan. Ahead, the landscape shifts. Not dunes this time, but stretches of flat grassland, rolling steppe that looks deceptively gentle. Here, You meet the nomads. Their yurts appear first, round tents of felt and hide that squat against the horizon like patient mushrooms. Smoke drifts upward from a few, carrying the faint smell of milk boiling. Children run barefoot across the grass, chasing each other with sticks, while their parents eye the caravan with the wary calm of people who've seen too many travelers come and go. You trudge closer, and one of them, a tall man with weathered cheekbones, raises a hand in greeting. The nomads are not just spectators. They are participants in this road, though their role is different from the merchants. You notice how their herds graze nearby. Shaggy horses, sheep, and even yaks. Animals so essential that without them the Silk Road might not have functioned at all. These steppe dwellers are masters of mobility. They can pack their lives into a bundle and move before a caravan has even crossed the next ridge. One of them invites you into a yurt. Inside, the air is warm, heavy with the smell of wool and smoke. A felt rug covers the ground, patterned in swirls that seem to echo the endless sky outside. You're offered a bowl of fermented mare's milk, yes, more kumis, and this time you manage not to grimace too obviously. They laugh, amused by your effort. Hospitality is their currency, and though their homes are temporary, their welcome feels sturdy. As you sit, you listen. The conversation drifts between practicalities and pride. A woman explains how their felt is made, layering wool, soaking it, pounding it, until it becomes tough enough to resist the winds. Another boasts about her horses, sleek creatures trained to obey whistles as if responding to secret codes. Historians still argue whether it was these nomads' horsemanship that gave rise to some of the greatest empires, from the Scythians to the Mongols. You sip your drink and imagine armies rising from this very grass, sweeping across continents on hooves. Outside, bargaining begins. Caravans and nomads exchange wool, milk, and horses for salt, silk, and metal goods. You watch as a bolt of bright Chinese silk is unrolled, its shimmer catching even the hard sun, and the nomads' eyes widen. They may roam the grasslands, but they're just as captivated by the strange treasures of distant lands as any city merchant. There's a quirky tidbit passed along by one traveler. Apparently, some nomads use animal dung not only as fuel, but also as insulation, stuffing it into cracks of yurts to keep out the cold. You glance around, and suddenly wonder what's hidden beneath the rugs and walls you admired earlier. Still, the logic is flawless. The steppe teaches you to use every scrap of resource, even the ones outsiders wrinkle their noses at. You wander farther and see how fluid life here is. Horses are tethered lightly, ready to be moved. Children practice archery with tiny bows. Elders sit outside, squinting at the horizon as though it holds every answer. There's a serenity in their impermanence, a freedom you envy for a moment. While you trudge endlessly toward fixed destinations, they thrive in motion, their whole world packed onto the backs of animals. As the sun dips, the caravan prepares to move again, but the memory of the nomads lingers. You think of their tents, their herds, their laughter at your awkward sip of kumis. You realize the Silk Road wasn't just a line connecting cities. It was a web that passed through living landscapes, weaving nomads and their skills into its fabric. When you leave, one child runs after you, pressing a small carved bone into your palm, a keepsake or maybe just a trinket he wanted to be rid of. You tuck it away carefully. It feels like proof that for one brief evening, you weren't just a stranger marching through. You were part of their world, however fleetingly. The caravan shifts back into rhythm. The grassland recedes, the horizon widens, and the night wind cools your face. Somewhere behind you, Yurts fold down, horses are saddled, and the nomads slip once again into the fluid anonymity of the steppe. You wonder how many more you'll meet before this journey is done, and how many will remain only as dust in memory. The caravan crests a ridge at sunrise, and the horizon gleams with a different kind of shimmer. Not water, not mirage, but bundles of fabric slung over camelbacks. For days now you've heard whispers about the heart of this trade. Silk. And now, finally, you see it. Rolls of the stuff peek from crates, bright as if they've trapped dawn itself inside their threads. You walk beside a merchant who boasts endlessly about his cargo. He tells you silk isn't just cloth, it's magic woven into fiber. In China, where the secret began, it was guarded so tightly that revealing it could earn you a death sentence. Historians still argue whether the story of silk smuggled west by a clever princess hiding cocoons in her hair is true or just legend. But when you run your fingers across the fabric, smooth and almost liquid, you can believe any story attached to it. The merchant lets you hold a scrap. It glows faintly in the morning light, lighter than you expect and strong in a way your rough wool cloak could never match. You think of Roman senators railing against the immorality of men wearing something so sheer, so luxurious. Yet they couldn't stop themselves, or their wives, from buying it. That's the paradox. The louder the outrage, the stronger the demand. At the next stop, you see silk in motion. A caravan master lays out lengths dyed deep crimson, the color rich and bold against the desert's muted palette. Another reveals bolts of blue, indigo so dark it seems like a piece of midnight sky has been stitched down. You realize each thread has traveled not only distance but meaning. Red for power, blue for mystery, gold for divinity. These colors speak across cultures, their language older than any alphabet. Nearby, a scholar traveling with the caravan takes a moment to lecture, because of course there's always one scholar. He explains how silk isn't just fabric, it's an economic engine, fueling trade routes that stretch like veins across continents. Without it, he insists, the Silk Road might never have existed. Others roll their eyes, but you can't deny the truth of it. Silk isn't just wealth, it's identity, status, a shimmering passport. A quirky tidbit reaches your ears. In some courts, people once believed silk could heal wounds if applied as a bandage. You imagine soldiers with glittering wrappings, half miracle, half fashion statement. Whether it worked or not, you suspect the placebo effect alone could have made a man swear he was mending faster. You pause at a loom set up by a woman traveling with the group. She demonstrates how threads unravel from cocoons, her hands steady, her patience infinite. The hiss of fibers winding becomes a kind of lullaby, a reminder that every luxury begins with someone's painstaking work. You think about the mulberry trees back in China, the caterpillars munching away, unaware they're fueling empires. At camp that night, silk takes on another form: status. A man wraps a strip around his head as a turban, clearly proud of his wealth. Others gather to touch, admire, and envy. You notice, though, that jealousy is never far from admiration. One guard mutters that silk attracts thieves like honey draws flies. And you can't help but believe him, watching how eyes linger too long on those gleaming rolls strapped to camelbacks. Historians still debate how much silk shaped politics itself. Did kings wage wars to control its flow, or did wars simply drag silk along in their wake? You picture emperors and generals draped in shining garments while armies shivered in rough cloth. Silk wasn't just treasure. It was propaganda, proof that rulers could command the rarest things. Before sleep, you stretch out on your blanket and run your fingers across that scrap of silk again. It feels impossibly soft against your calloused hands. In the darkness, you wonder how far it will travel, whose shoulders it will eventually drape, and whether they'll ever think about the desert dust that clung to it first. As the caravan settles into silence, you tuck the cloth carefully into your bag. Maybe you'll trade it later, maybe you'll keep it as a reminder. Either way, it feels like you're carrying a piece of the Silk Road itself, thin, fragile, yet powerful enough to change the world. The lanterns, now fully assembled, begin to claim their rightful place in the workshop. Each one is lifted with reverence and set carefully onto a low wooden shelf, where they sit side by side, glowing like patient stars waiting for nightfall. The paper shades, once pale and quiet, now come alive under the soft flame of the small candles placed inside them. Their surfaces ripple with warmth, a delicate dance of shadow and light. The room itself begins to transform, no longer merely a space of wood, tools, and brushes, but a quiet universe of glowing moons. The lantern maker steps back for a moment, hands resting on the small of his back, as he admires his creations. For him, this is not merely craft, it is meditation. Each lantern carries within it the memory of the evening, the touch of water, the patience of brush strokes, the rhythm of steady breathing. The young apprentice, too, feels the weight of the moment. Though his hands are still clumsy, his heart feels lighter, brighter. He sees how each lantern, though simple in appearance, is alive with something beyond paper and bamboo. It is alive with spirit, a spirit of stillness, a spirit of continuity, of one generation quietly teaching the next. The old man lights another lantern and places it in the window, facing the street. From outside, a passerby glances up, pausing at the sight. To the world, it is only a soft glow in the dark. But to the workshop, it is a quiet promise that the light will always return. The evening deepens. Shadows stretch across the floor, softening into pools of quiet. The lanterns flicker gently, like whispers between old friends. The sounds of the village outside, distant footsteps, the hush of wind, begin to fade, leaving only the warm silence of the workshop. At last, the master lowers himself onto a cushion, folding his legs comfortably beneath him. The apprentice follows, mirroring his teacher's posture. No words pass between them. Only the lanterns speak now, their light swaying with the rhythm of unseen currents of air. And in this silence, in this gentle glow, the workshop feels like a sacred place. Not a temple of stone, not a shrine of gold, but a temple of light, built from the humble hands of a lantern maker. The evening has ripened fully into night, and yet, rather than slipping into darkness, the world feels illuminated, touched by the quiet strength of fragile light. Beyond the cloisters, past an arched doorway carved with faded stone vines, lay the gardens of the monastery. They were not grand in the way of royal estates, but rather modest and purposeful, designed for the quiet rhythm of monastic life. Yet in their simplicity, they held a beauty that felt timeless. Gravel paths wound gently between raised beds, where herbs and vegetables grew in neat rows. Mint, thyme, and sage released their earthy fragrances when brushed by the evening breeze. A faint sweetness floated from a patch of lavender, its pale purple blossoms catching the last soft rays of dusk. Monks tended to these gardens in silence, their tools simple, their movements unhurried. They bent to pull a weed, adjusted a wooden stake for beans, or poured water from clay jars. The garden was not only for sustenance, but for meditation. Each task was an act of patience, a prayer woven into the soil. At the far edge of the garden stood a small orchard. Apple trees stretched their branches low, heavy with ripening fruit. The leaves whispered softly as though carrying secrets to the wind. Beneath one tree, a bench of weathered oak provided a place for reflection. Sitting there, one could hear both the distant chant of vespers and the nearer hum of bees returning to their hives. Not all corners of the monastery were touched by labor. Some were designed simply for peace. A stone fountain trickled gently in a secluded alcove, its water catching the twilight glow. Pigeons sometimes gathered there, dipping their beaks before fluttering away to the rooftops. The fountain's sound mingled with the fading chorus of birds, creating a harmony that seemed eternal. As night approached, the garden shifted in tone. The herbs darkened to deep green, the lavender's color muted under the dimming sky. Fireflies began to appear, blinking like wandering stars. The monks moved more slowly now, finishing their work before retreating indoors. The garden became hushed as though it too had entered its evening prayer. And yet, one could imagine a monk lingering, pausing to gaze at the heavens just as the first stars appeared. The sky above the monastery stretched wide and clear, untouched by the glow of distant towns. In those moments, the garden was not only a place of cultivation, but a doorway to stillness, a reminder that the rhythms of earth and sky were joined in one unbroken flow. As you drift deeper into this quiet journey, let us step into the ordinary yet enchanting world of Pompeii's daily life. The kind of life that once filled the city's stone-paved streets with laughter, chatter, and footsteps, but now lies in gentle silence. Imagine yourself in the bustling forum, the heart of Pompeii. It was the city's marketplace, where merchants displayed their goods under wide awnings to shield themselves from the Mediterranean sun. The air would have been filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, olives glistening in baskets, amphorae of wine standing upright, and spices brought from distant lands. Sellers would call out softly, their voices mixing with the rhythmic clatter of sandals on stone. Now, all is still. The stalls are gone, but the stone bases where they once stood remain silent witnesses to the daily commerce of life. Moving further, let us pause at a thermopolium, the ancient equivalent of a street cafe. You can almost see the marble counters with round holes in them, each once filled with hot dishes ready for passers-by. Workers, travelers, or those too busy to cook at home would stop for a quick meal. The clinking of cups, the fragrance of herbs and sauces, and the warmth of conversations once filled these corners. If you listen closely in this quiet reverie, you may almost hear the faint echoes of laughter and the rustle of togas as customers gathered. And then we step gently into a domus, a Roman home. The entrance leads us to an atrium, open to the sky, where rainwater once trickled into a central pool. Soft light would filter down through the opening above, casting gentle patterns on the mosaic floors. Each tile still lies in its place, tiny colored stones that once told stories of myths, gods, and everyday life. The walls are adorned with frescoes, gardens, animals, and playful cupids frozen forever in pigment. Deeper inside the home, a peristyle garden opens up, with columns surrounding a courtyard. Here, small fountains once gurgled, and neatly tended plants brought calm to the household. Imagine olive trees swaying, roses blooming, and the faint fragrance of laurel drifting in the air. Servants moved quietly, preparing meals, fetching water, or tending to children's play. It was a life of rhythms: work, rest, feasting, and prayer. As twilight fell in Pompeii, families would gather in these courtyards, sharing stories of the day. Oil lamps flickered gently, their golden light bouncing off painted walls, creating an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy. The sound of lyres or flutes might accompany the evening, soft music flowing with the cooling breeze. Now, all of it rests in stillness. Yet as we walk through these preserved spaces, we can feel that the pulse of life lingers faintly. The markets, the cafes, the homes, they whisper of people who lived, loved, and laughed, unaware of the fate that awaited them. And in this reflection, there is a quiet lesson that every ordinary moment of life, a shared meal, a conversation, a walk through a marketplace, holds a timeless beauty. As our journey through the world of the Lantern Maker comes to its quiet end, imagine once more the gentle glow of the lanterns surrounding you. The workshop, though simple, feels like a sacred space, filled with patience, artistry, and the warmth of tradition passed down through generations. The Lantern Maker moves softly in the background, carefully placing one last candle inside a paper lantern. The flame flickers to life, casting a tender light that dances across the wooden walls. He smiles, not at you, but at the lantern itself, as if it were a living companion, born from his hands and heart. Outside, the night air is still. The streets are silent except for the whisper of a passing breeze. In the distance, a faint temple bell chimes, its sound rolling gently across the quiet town. The lanterns sway slightly, as though bowing to the rhythm of the bell. You take a deep breath, feeling the calmness that is gathered around you. It is the kind of peace that asks for nothing, not effort, not worry, not even thought. Just rest. The Lantern Maker extinguishes his tools, tidies his small workbench, and bows softly to the lanterns glowing in the evening stillness. Each one seems to hold a wish, a story, a dream, glowing gently like a guide through the night. Now, imagine closing your eyes and carrying that glow within you. Let the lantern's light guide you into rest, soft, warm, and endless. You are safe, you are calm, you are drifting. And as you drift, remember, like a lantern glowing quietly in the dark, your own light will always guide you home, to peace, to stillness, to sleep.